Today we are discussing from chapter 11, text 29. Yata pradiptam jvalanam patangha vishanti nashaya samvritta vegaha tataiva nashaya pishanti lokas tavapi vaktrani samvritta vegaha. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I see all people rushing full speed into your mouths as moths dash to destruction in a blazing fire. ओम ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य शलाके चक्षुरुन्मिलितं तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे. So here we see Arjuna is seeing the time Kala Rupa or form of time in the universal form of the Lord. So example is given here as to how all the people are rushing into the mouth of the universal form as moths dash to destruction in a blazing fire. So the moth is a very tiny insect to which the fire looks very, very attractive, and it rushes into the fire with a full speed, and then when it rushes into the fire, it is burned to death. Similarly, this example is that all the living entities are rushing towards death and into the universal form of the Lord. Now, if you see here, just as the moth enters with a very great speed, materialistic people who are engaged in sense gratification, they are entering death at a very fast pace without their knowledge, but at the same time, they don't realize that the sense gratification is taking them to death at much faster. Examples are given in Srimad Bhagavatam itself. Now, sense gratification looks very, very attractive for a materialistic person. And when he's engaged in sense gratification, he does not know that the Lord, as in the form of time, is taking every moment of his life, and it is going very fast. At some point he realizes that I'm enjoying, but I don't have much more time. This is how a materialistic person thinks, and time is flying very fast. So people who are engaged in sense gratification, of course, everybody meets with death. But here, the example is specific for materialistic people, and we'll have a small comparison with the previous verse also. Because when they are engaged in sense gratification, they don't realize that the time is moving very fast. The example here is given about Duryodhana and others who are engaged in the Mahabharata battle. Duryodhana was persuaded by everybody, including Maitreya Rishi, to not engage in this war. But he was very, very adamant, and he did not heed to the instructions of Maitreya Rishi. On the other hand, he patted on his thigh out of his pride, and he enforced this war on the Pandavas. Ultimately, what happened was Bhima killed Duryodhana by hitting him on the thigh with his gada. So this is how materialistic people are all engaged, and they want to somehow attain their goal of sense gratification, but they don't realize that how it is leading them to death. Of course, everybody has to die, but at a very fast pace, and they are voluntarily want to enjoy, and they are very forceful to have this opulence, for which they are prepared to get into any extent so that they achieve their goal. So everyone is entering the fire of destruction in the form of death. But a materialistic person is getting attracted through sense gratification and entering death. Now, they want to attain opulence at any cost, even at the cost of adharma or practice of irreligion. So in the fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, a quote is given as to how wonderful it is that foolish materialist does not need the great danger, heed the great danger of impending death. He knows that death will come, yet he is nevertheless careless and neglectful. And if a father dies, he wants to enjoy the son's property. And if the son dies, the father wants to enjoy his son's possession. As well as either case, they are always wanting to enjoy material happiness with somehow forceful acquisition. So similarly, Narad Muni is giving instructions in the Srimad Bhagavatam we find to King Prachina Vanisad. He says that, my dear king, please search out that deer who is engaged in eating grass in a very nice flower garden along with his wife. Because normally, a deer, male deer, female deer, when they are all together, there is a very nice flower garden in which they are engaged in eating grass. But what happened? That deer is very much attached to his business of eating grass and is enjoying the sweet singing of the bumblebees in the garden. So Narad Muni is telling, just try to understand his position. He is unaware that before him is a tiger which is accustomed to living at the cost of another's flesh. And behind the deer is a hunter who is threatening to pierce him with sharp arrows. Thus the deer's death is imminent. So just like a deer, he is trying to enjoy, but there is a tiger in the front and there is a hunter in the rear. The deer does not know, but rather he is trying to enjoy. He is eating grass very nicely. The tiger does not realize that his death is imminent. So the king is hereby advised to find out a deer like that, although he knows that there is death from all the sides, but still he's simply enjoying eating grass in the nice flower garden because the garden looks beautiful and he's also enjoying this thing, sound that is there. So all these living entities like human beings that are given here, they all think themselves to be very, very happy in the midst of their families. Like in a flower garden, like hearing the sweet humming of the bumblebees. A deer enjoys the sweet humming of these bumblebees. And here it is given that everyone in a family life is centered around his wife, who is the beauty of a family life. So, and also the bumblebees are also compared like humming of to the talk of children. Children, when they are young, very, very nice, they look very attractive. And because they are innocent, they are very attractive, and also their way of talking, their smiling, it attracts everyone. Similarly, human beings, just like the deer, enjoy family life without knowing that the factor of time is there right before him in the form of death. So they are all enjoying fruitive activities and creating in the process, bound by the activities that they are performing to enjoy the results of their activities. Now, for a deer to run after a mirage of water is not unusual. But similarly, living entities are very much uh, uh, attracted to the process of material activities or enjoying the fruits of these material activities without realizing that in the form of death, they are being killed at every moment of time. The Lord himself says, Bhagavad Gita, that he is the form of time. And this time takes a moment of every living entity. But if we see here, there is an example given in the previous sloka also. We'll just compare both of them. In the previous sloka, we find that the rivers are entering into the oceans. In the same form, the living entities are seen. Now, the rivers have got a natural tendency to enter into the ocean. So the living entities also have their natural tendency to enter into the form of the Lord in the process of death. But then there is a small difference between the death of the devotees and the death of non-devotees. Now, for example, Srila Prabhupada always gives an example of a cat holding a kitten in its mouth and a cat holding a rat in its mouth. When a cat holds a kitten, the kitten is very, very comfortable and the cat is holding it. But at in the same mouth, when the cat holds a rat, it is the form of the rat is worried. So the same way, everybody has to meet with death at some point or the other. But for a materialist, death comes in the form of a fear at the end of his life. Whereas a non-devotee also knows that he has to die, but then he is not worried about it, but rather he is sure that whatever form of life he gets in his next birth, he is going to continue with his devotional service. So this is the difference between the death of a devotee and a non-devotee. Now, Sri Swami, one of the acharyas in our Sampradaya, he has given a very nice comment saying that for an exalted devotee, death is very, very special. For pure devotees, death is like a lightning followed by illumination, whereas non-devotees, death is like darkness. It's a very good example. So for devotees, death is like lightning. What happens in the lightning is that you see light uh, coming for a moment of time, and then it's illuminated all around. So for a devotee, death also is like that. He welcomes death. He is not fearful of death, whereas a non-devotee is always fearful of death. Whereas for them, death is like a darkness, full of fear. Srila Prabhupada always quotes that spiritual life is difficult, but material life is just impossible. So he says that do your sadhana, do your bhajana, and learn how to die. One has to see Krishna either in his form as Krishna, or see him in the ghastly form of death. So either one has to see Krishna in his beautiful, attractive form, or one has to see Krishna in the form of death. So there are statements in the scriptures as to how death is very, very painful. It is said that a person who is going to leave his body is not able to express the amount of pain and anguish that he goes through at the time of his death. All that he can do is from his mouth, the sound gur 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 comes, but he's not able to express why he is or how much pain he is going through. But Shastra has explained that the amount of pain that one can get by the bite of thousands of scorpions, that much of a pain a person who is going through in the last moment before his death, he actually goes through. This is what the statement given in the scriptures. Even if one gets a bite of one single scorpion, it is very, very painful. Imagine the pain of the sting of so many thousands of scorpions. That much of a pain one goes through, but he's unable to express. Similarly, one has to go through a lot of pain at the time of his birth because he is there in the womb of the mother. He can't move. The living entity can't move. He's bitten by so many worms, etc. So the instruction is birth, death, old age, and disease. They are all painful in this material world. That's what the material world is about. But for a devotee, still in spite of taking birth in this material world, he easily conquers death without much of a pain. There is one very nice quote in the example given in Srimad Bhagavatam about Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj was a very great devotee of the Lord, but he transcended death in the sense that it is mentioned that Dhruva Maharaj suddenly saw death personified before him, but he was not afraid of death instead of death giving him trouble. So death gives trouble to everybody, but Dhruva Maharaj was not afraid of death. Rather, it is mentioned that Dhruva Maharaj took advantage of the death's presence and put his feet on the head of death and mounted the transcendental plane. So Dhruva Maharaj boarded the plane which came from Vaikuntha to take him back to the spiritual world, and he took advantage of it by, rather, it is mentioned that death personified came and offered him obeisances. And at that time, Dhruva Maharaj put his feet on the head of death and he got into that unique airplane. So this is what is very important to understand. Everybody has to die one day, but those who are engaged in sense gratification, for them death is very, very painful, and they are entering that form of death very, very fast by being engaged in sense gratification. So before I conclude, there is a very nice instruction Krishna gives in Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, even if people know how to achieve happiness and avoid unhappiness, they still do not know the process by which death will not be able to exert its power over them. So people might try to get happiness which doesn't come, and they might try to unavoid happiness, But in the process of engaging in all these activities, they do not know how death is, time in the form of death is taking over them every moment of time. And he said that death is not at all pleasing, but still everyone is like a condemned man who is led to a place of execution in this material world. So what happiness can one get in this material world? By the process of sense gratification. So before I conclude, there is a very nice discussion between King Jadabharata, King Rahugana and Jadabharata, where Jadabharata is telling that the living entity in this forest of material existence takes shelter of creepers and desires to hear the chirping of the birds in these creepers. And being afraid of roaring lions in the forest, he makes friends with cranes, herons, and vultures. So a living entity does not know what is his shelter in this material world, who is none other than Krishna. So when he does not take shelter of Krishna, then automatically death becomes very, very fearful and forceful on him. And this is what is explained, that how a moth sees fire, he becomes very, very attracted to the fire. But ultimately, when he enters into the fire, he is burned to death immediately. Similarly, all the living entities who are engaged in sense gratification, they are entering the process of death at a very, very fast pace, voluntarily out of their desire to enjoy sense gratification without their own realization. Hare Krishna. So this is what I had in today's class. So for the next 1 minute, I can take any questions or comments if anybody has got.